Well. It appears that there was quite a reaction on my last video. The Dark Soy Boy community clearly doesn't understand criticism or critique, so I've been pulled into the fray again. If you idiots want me to keep talking about this truly awful game, then I suppose I can. It's very easy to do when it's the worst of the trilogy. Some people claimed in my Dark Souls 3 video that I said it was bad. All I said is I simply wouldn't play it. You guys always try to spin some narrative that I'm this big mean guy saying all these mean things, but all I'm saying are my thoughts. Leave it up to the Soy Souls community to twist and pervert my message to the point they think I was trying to be mostly negative with a thumbnail like this. They also keep saying I don't just keep my criticism on the game and that I'll throw some jabs at its fans. That's not true, you fucking idiots. Honestly, I shouldn't be surprised that the critical Michael Zaki White Knights would jump to the defense that I hurt their feelings by only talking about a game. It barely them. Some other little thing people brought up was, well, what about builds, NPCs, lore, PvP, and all that stuff? I just don't play the game that way, so I don't interact with any of those mechanics. If it's not mapped to R1, I'm not using it. So maybe it would be fun for someone who does engage with those little things. But for me, I'm gonna keep going on my full critique while ignoring massive chunks of the game. Thank you very much. Some may say I've gone on record saying I like the lore of these games, so it'd be weird for me not to bring it up here. But that only applies to things I want to like. If it's something I don't want to like, I'm not going to bother mentioning it, which this is one of those cases. Also, unfortunately, I incorrectly called Farron Keep Farron Woods, so when I mention it later, that's what I'll be calling it. Hope it doesn't draw any parallels to anything. Now with that out of the way, I get to move on to other points I wished I expanded upon a bit more in my original video, now that you bumbling idiots have mouthed off to me. One of the main things the comment yappers were talking about is how I was talking about the enemies, saying I should fight them instead of running past them. I took this very literal and I fought every single enemy in the game. And let me tell you, it let me reflect on how much more awful this system was than I thought. So many times I'd end up fighting so many enemies I'd sit there and wonder, am I supposed to fight all these guys or walk past everything? The reason I came to this conclusion was because when I was fighting the enemies, they'd fight back and actually manage to kill me sometimes. The fact that I died to these enemies doesn't mean I should get better or that some of these encounters themselves are meant to be hard. It means I'm going to skip it. And then the enemies have the nerve to follow me and try to attack me regardless, as if they don't see me trying to ignore a massive chunk of the game. That's just ridiculous. Some may say most games put enemies there for you to fight them. Anyways, let me ask you Dark Souls 3 fans a question. At what point do you stop glazing this game and accept this is just horrendous game design? Another example is some of these enemy setups. The way that some of these guys are positioned, it's quite clear they're only in the game because the devs intentionally want you to sell it. And in Orlando, there are these invisible knights that you have no way to react to. Right after the spinny tower and right before Aldrich, there's two knights that when I turn the camera away from them and don't look at them, they come out of nowhere. The same goes for the archers before the spinning tower. When I don't look at where the arrows are coming from, they literally come out of thin air. It's like they have invisible archers. The game is punishing me for opening it at this rate. This game doesn't reward you for paying attention. It's clear the devs wanted you to buy this game just to refund it after they had their giggles off of your suffering. Some people want me to talk about this point more, but that's really hard to do when I find them so boring, slow, and clunky. But one of the bigger issues I missed in my first video is the trial and error in these games drives me up the wall. In this game, you'll have to learn bosses through multiple runs, getting hit by things that do crazy damage just so you can master the deep mechanics of what the boss does. But unlike a good game like Dark Souls 1, the learning process is significantly less fun. I have to spend hours trying to learn and perfect these guys to unlock the fun mode. And sure, I had a little smile on my face, but it wasn't that I was happy that I beat this boss and overcame adversity. More so that it was finally over this torturous, arduous experience. They put Bloodborne speed bosses in my Dark Souls game, which I'm not really a fan of. At this point, quick step should be the normal dodge, because it's not fair that these guys can move like crazy while I'm stuck with the basic FromSoft formula of dodge R1. This formula just doesn't work anymore, and I don't think I'll be buying any FromSoft games that come out after this one, to be honest. It's not me at this point for refusing to adapt. It's the game, as it itself is just doing too much. Another point I want to bring up is the bad moveset ideas of these bosses. Dark Souls 1 was a masterclass of good boss ideas, with things like Quailag and Gargoyles being prime examples. Both of these bosses made you focus on positioning and spacing, with Quailag's example being the little fire puddle she'd spit out, and with Gargoyles, because you had to focus on two different opponents. It's something that's sorely lacking in the other entries. I can hear you saying, well, what about Demon Princess, Freed Second Phase, or Iron Dragon Slayer? And to them I'd say, these are just environmental problems, or just them adding a second guy. I wouldn't call that amazing design, but I do want to bring up a fun boss design choice in this game, where when you're fighting Osiris in the second phase, he has a 0 frame tackle. That's just ridiculous, and this kind of stuff would just never happen in any of the other games. There's some agonizing mechanics in this game that I forgot to mention. The invaders being able to respawn, being able to get invaded without any way to cut it off, the music clipping in and out. I just don't understand how anyone would like this game. One of the worst mechanics, quote unquote, revolves around this ember system. Once you die, you lose about 20% of your health bar, and there isn't a single way to get that health back other than defeating a boss. What if I want that health back while I'm exploring? Or what if I die to a boss the first time and want that bonus health when I challenge them the second time? There's literally no items or anything I can use to re-enter the embered state, and it's driving me mad. There's so much to say against the mechanics here that I can't believe anyone would attempt to defend such an objectively flawed piece of work. Something else some fool might try to say here is I can look past the negatives and appreciate what's here. There's nothing here, you cult-like demons. There are no deep or good mechanics, unlike Dark Souls 1, the best one by far. Let alone, let's talk about another fun gimmick here. There are multiple bugs in the code. Like before, when you fight the hollows at the high wall of Lothric, they can be seen praying or something similar. Are these not enemies? Why is their sole function not to just attack me? The same goes for if you repulse the pontiff dogs and they fall on their backs, refusing to get up. It's things like this that let you know this game is an awful, incomplete, buggy mess that should have never been released in this state or any other than those. Sometimes enemies will just bug out, beginning to twirl in place, or get stuck, or in the case of the dogs, they'll just warp to your location. Seeing as this is the only game in the entire trilogy with those issues, it sticks out like a big, rotten, sore thumb. Boss runbacks here are by far the worst in the trilogy, and damn near the worst thing they've ever made. Aldrich and his cronies have an awful runback. Then Ancient Wyvern's area in itself is a runback. Are FromSoft serious? I didn't even cherry pick a few bad examples while ignoring 90% of the game. It's all pretty much like this. It's a good thing that no other games in the trilogy had this issue, especially Demon Souls or Dark Souls 1. They were great and damn near flawless with this system. I don't understand why this game in particular decided to be Boss Runback Simulator. Sometimes when I'm thinking about fighting a boss here, I imagine the slog of walking around the gruel in this game, and I immediately cut it off. Now, I know I said I wouldn't talk about the NPCs, but this is more of a surface level thing. When talking to NPCs like Igon, he'll mention how you'll die over and over again. It feels like the writers here intentionally did this to spit a little venom at us, the player base, for playing it. And a Michael Zaki quote that's definitely real that I sourced by myself and didn't take from someone who didn't even show it on screen: difficulty was never the point of these games. So I find it weird only in this game they'd make a character talk about you dying as if it's some sort of expected thing. Clearly he's lost his way, as they never tried to push any narrative like this before, especially in my favorite game, Dark Souls 1 Prepare to Die Edition. But now let's go into a huge point I have against this game: the rewards. Now I play this game with a dex build exclusively, and unfortunately when playing this game, I noticed there's other weapon types, miracles, sorceries, and other items for the players to use. These are all completely useless to me, so 90% of the game has no value to me at all. So many times I feel like I beat a boss and wasted my time, as they have nothing for me to use. Nameless King and Iron Dragon Slayer would be two good examples. Neither of them drop anything for me to use, so it somewhat feels like a waste of time even dealing with them. Some may say, well, isn't there some fun in fighting the bosses or just playing the game? Anyways, it's clear this game was made with only a few certain demographics in mind. People who like destroying the game with broken builds, people who like learning the game to the point I can tell they don't take a shower, and people I wouldn't like very much. Some genius in the comments might try to say something like, well, if you ever respec in the future, wouldn't those items be helpful then? No, because I never do that. This is the way I play the game, and it's never changing as long as I own it. Didn't mean to double dip on this point in my last video and now this one, but it feels like unlike every other Souls game ever made, this one has some bad areas. Fair and Keep is a prime example. Like I said in the last video, it's goopy ground you have to roll around in like a pig in slop. Some may say, well, what about Irithil, Catacombs, Profane Capital? So anyways, in Fair and Keep, they have these grabber guys with the weirdest, wonkiest movement I've ever seen that will jump up in the air where you can't hit them, grab you, and then plop you into this goop again. This is objectively a horrendous enemy design, but I guess that tracks with this god-awful game. The sky around here is ugly, the enemies are ugly, the swamp water is ugly. That's just ridiculous. On to the other areas. Fair and Keep keeps see what I did there? Getting worse and worse. Right before a boss fight, there's a run-up with a bunch of these Gru guys and some Dark Wraiths. It's an awfully thought-out area, as am I supposed to fight all these guys or run past everything? Like I said earlier, it doesn't make any sense to stick the entirety of the game's enemies in this one section. On to the next area. Fair and Keep has a Stray Demon, which is just a carbon copy of the Asylum Demon from Dark Souls 1. I'm astounded by Michael Zaki's laziness this time around. Now I finally feel comfortable ending this segment and this part of the conversation here, as I've talked about every single area that matters in between this video and the last one. Now, let's go over some of these cultists' comments they left in my last video. Strawman1999 said, LMAO, this guy's dumb. This is the most intelligent FromSoft argument ever. When will you guys say anything more than mad 'cause bad? Literally no one else in the thousands of comments said anything smarter than this. Some other genius in the comments said, Dark Souls 3 is the Ninja Gaiden of the trilogy. Are we serious? These are the bravest 3 defenders. There's no intelligent arguments from these cultists, which is why I never bother responding to these scroats 99% of the time. They just suck. All of them. I saw some other ones like, why are you using a level 3 broadsword on a mid-game area? Why are you cutting context on the ganks you caused? And the weakest one. They're legitimate things to criticize this game for, but to throw random lies in makes me not want to listen to you. But those don't really matter, so I won't be responding to those. It's clear this community can't fathom what a critique is, so they implode the moment they actually hear one. A bunch of sensitive man babies, to be honest. This game isn't good. It'll never be good. And the only ones who'll disagree with me are those cultists who make up 90% of the FromSoft soy boy community. Do you think they named themselves FromSoft because they knew their community would be soft and unable to handle critique? Maybe that's the one thing Michael Zaki did right, because it's clear from playing this miserable thing that should have never existed. He's clearly not good at game design. Everyone thinks I come into these critiques with bad faith just because I made a thumbnail with big bold red letters saying it sucks, and the fact that I only like to focus on things I didn't like. How would you come to a conclusion like that unless you were a feeble-minded cultist? This is my subjective critique of an objectively flawed game. I'm not exaggerating or making up any game mechanics. I'm just the only one in the entire FromSoft fandom that can stand up against you weaklings. Anyways, that's been my whole critique. Like I said last time, Dark Souls 3's fandom seems to be itching for content, because they can't make their own. So if you want more, you little FromSoft goblins, I guess comment more. If you leave a good counterpoint, I'm gonna ignore it. But if you leave a weaker one, I might pick that out and shit on you for it. But that's been it for me. Later, FromSoy fans.